I think that's an easy no. I think it's obvious when you see how Africans relate with issues globally in the media spaces now. It's obvious that there is something that is not being done right, and it's in how they are taught. Because every African that accesses social media is actually an educated African. There is no illiterate person that's on social media trying to speak English and so on. So most of the people that are accessing these platforms have attained some sort of formal education, and the lapses of the formal education can be seen in the reasoning that they present, but sometimes it's just in the utter, failure for them to identify what's important and what's principle to them. So it is a clear no. And in fact, that can also be attributed to when the education that is prevalent in Africa was brought into play, and whether African countries have done a lot of inroads into that education, cycle to have their own impact on the mind that comes out of that education every 3-4 years of its undertaking. I think that African countries are almost at the same level. All of them are third world, except a few islands, really a few islands. South Africa is still third world. So you need to put that into perspective to understand why, with all the time Africa has spent independent, are they all third world? Is it a question of individual leaders, or it's also a question of time frames? That's one. Then two, I think that Africa has so far failed to define what will be here, and impose it, because the understanding of the presence of the United Nations, for example, is so that you can achieve a raining down on countries which are trying to be big-headed, if not countries, on leaders among those countries that are just decided that it's going to be a monarchy of their imperialist personalities. And so that is also something Africa has failed on. The African Union cannot come to a country without respecting the sovereignty of that country too much, to the extent that a genocide happened in 1994 in Rwanda, and the quickest help that Africa was going to get for that genocide, that community was getting for that genocide, was US tanks that had to first come through Kenya, go through Uganda. The genocide happened, and 1 month after the genocide is when those US soldiers and tanks arrived on ground. So for me, it's really about African organization and deliberation. What we are struggling with now also is the quality of Africa's population. You see, it is easy to say that they are not offering us good leadership, but the people who can say that do not form a number that can actually cause an impact on, therefore, the leaders who become leaders. The real intent of leadership in Africa is not just really to occupy the position. Everyone enters the office with an agenda. In most cases, Africa has suffered the notion of people that are dynastical leaders, that because you're so-and-so son, or because your father was so-and-so, you have some sort of divine right to be a leader in this community, and you shape yourself for that. But also the population quality has not been able to refuse that kind of notion, to reject it entirely. You'd find that it is easy for people to still believe this system. So there has not been a quick separation between cultural norms in Africa and what I would call democratic norms. There seems to be some sort of fusion, and that fusion is what is causing challenges. Some people cannot be questioned in Africa because of the role they have played in cultural growth in a particular society. Other people, because of how long they have built a particular system. So I want to say, one, for me, that not in all cases have African populations been led well. In fact, in the majority of cases, the records speak for themselves. There is war can't be in a full the whole country is at war. There is no government that is, there are borders, but no one can go to the borders. A country has been at war since its independence. So literally, there is no governance there. We just know that the country is no longer led by its colonial masters, but it has perpetually failed to come to the table and build consensus. So that kind of Africa cannot be an Africa that is taking off. That kind of Africa is a scary Africa. That's an Africa where you're uncertain when the next suicide bomber is going to show up. You are uncertain who the next president will come. If this one, who holds so much military power, seems to suggest that he does not want to go away, and the army is backing him. So you really need an Africa that is able to be empowered, to demand, but also to enforce. And for me, that starts from the unity of African superstructures like the African Union, superstructures like regional bodies, the ECOWAS, the East African Community, SADC. Those structures can put their feet down, but those structures must be therefore built by leaders that are not themselves a camp in Africa. It is very easy to, for example, you cannot expect that President Museveni of my country is going to have a very big issue against a president in South Sudan, whom he helped bring to power and probably has been controlling for a lot of time in terms of, guiding economic policy and national policy, perhaps even in the favor of Uganda. You cannot expect that it's going to rain down on him in a very big way. So you need perhaps a number of presidents who can actually rain down on one particular president, whoever they are, wherever they are, and support the people when the problem is the people versus a few in the country who have all the power for that country. I think there is enough superstructuring now. There are regional bodies, that are economic in nature, but also extend political dominance over their regions, like what ECOWAS did in the Gambia. Very resolute and very, very, very clear. Education institutions for Africa to understand the necessity. There's really not so much as to say the problem is in the education, because most of the African leaders see the problem. Really, the problem is at what I would call a will level. There is not enough willpower among African leaders to be able to just do the crazy things. For example, there's so many things that depend on being able to land in a country. But for African countries, moving around Africa requires a lot of visa. That it doesn't make sense. It would appear as if African countries are more interested in being independent than in developing, if it depends on helping themselves with other Africans. So for me, really, it's about continental leadership and returning to continental narratives that talk about Black people as Black people, talk about Africans in their general sense, not in their nationalistic senses, that talk about the challenges we share, that the nature of the history that we share as Africans, and the similarities of our people in terms of capacity, in terms of direction and hope. So it's really a question of what the leaders decide to put in place, and very strongly so. And the leaders must, in of themselves, be able to determine that they are not going to err, by trying to build a different agenda that is individualistic to them. They need to be the ones that lead the population to understand that working across borders is a foundation for a more successful future, as opposed to trying to look inward in your small markets and in your small production and capital capacities. And a friend of mine always reminds me that your people are your people. It doesn't matter where you travel in the world, your kinsmen will be those that are home in that small African village. you can abandon them, you can run away, and you can build a small success story for your family because of your education. But this continent will stay, and the people therein will stay. Every part of the world has been developed first by its own owning up and deciding that they're going to take a path for themselves that will put them at an advantage with the world, at an advantage with society's interests, an advantage with the hopes of their people. And until African young people, until African young leaders begin to make it their own responsibility to take their people to the places where they see other countries, where they hope that society needs to be, and where they hope that African leadership should place our people, our Africa will always wait for yet another generation. And as many generations as betray Africa will not get this continent separated. It may not get us colonized again, but it will not definitely give our people a better chance in the world. And so I want to thank those of you that go out of your way daily to contribute in your minute ways. Some of you through operating that small business, others through ensuring that you are actually contributing to a research study, and even others through ensuring that you offer leadership at different levels of your societies in Africa. Don't give up the chance, and always be up to the task to talk more about ourselves and to define yet again where Africa should go after it went away from the hands of those that were not originally from our lands. I thank you, and I hope that the good Lord will keep you safe until we talk again.